Lordaeron is one of the most notable regions in the Warcraft universe, being one of the key settings for Blizzard's blockbuster game, Warcraft 3. It's a zone that many of us remember fondly. You could even say it was peak Warcraft. But maybe I'm wearing some rose-tinted glasses here. Most of my memories of Warcraft are through playing WoW. And I have a confession. Yeah, I didn't complete the entirety of Warcraft 3. Yeah, I know what you're going to say, but whatever. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Tirisfal Glades zone in World of Warcraft, but more specifically, the Tirisfal Uplands from Turtle WoW. If you don't know what Turtle WoW is, I explained it in my last video, but to quickly explain it, Turtle WoW, also known as World of Warcraft Mysteries of Azeroth, is a fan-made expansion to the game. It's an alternative history of Azeroth that delves deeper into exploring the original lore of the game. It takes a different path from the Burning Crusade and emphasizes the familiar Azeroth of vanilla WoW, rather than the cosmic battle with the Burning Legion, which we saw in expansions such as TPC and Legion. While being heavily based on the lore from Warcraft 3 and vanilla WoW, Mysteries of Azeroth seeks to enhance the game by adding content that matches the already well-established lore of the Warcraft universe. The Tirisfal Glades are well known by anyone who's played World of Warcraft. It's the starting zone for the undead who align themselves with the Forsaken faction, the faction that broke free from the control of the Lich King and gained free will. They're currently led by Sylvanas Windrunner, the former Ranger General of Silvermoon, who was killed by the Lich King and then raised as a Banshee in his army. They've always had a loose relationship with the Horde and have mainly aligned with them out of an alliance of convenience, as the majority of the undead are literally hated by everyone else. Which isn't surprising when the Forsaken have betrayed their own faction more times than you can say Wonga. Go on, say it. Oh, look at the time, is that the Forsaken doing the war crime again? In Warcraft 3, the Tirisfal Glades was the centre of power for the Kingdom of Lordaeron, the human kingdom that controlled the majority of the northern eastern kingdoms. The capital city of the kingdom was called Capital City, real original. The kingdom's ruler, King Terenus Menethil II, was murdered by his own son, Arthas, as seen in Warcraft 3.
Succeeding you, father.
Eventually leading to its fall. Capital City, now renamed the Undercity, is the capital of the Forsaken. One thing that I believe Blizzard did quite well during the early years of WoW was to leave areas which weren't quite fleshed out open to interpretation. Many of these areas were eventually developed upon during the Cataclysm expansion and many later expansions. But in the era from vanilla WoW up to Wrath of the Lich King, many of these areas were kind of up to interpretation. This is where devs like the Turtle WoW devs step in, or in my case, roleplayers. A role-playing guild that I used to be a part of would often use the area known as the Scarlet Enclave in the Eastern Plaguelands as a base for our own guild. We named it Caer Elden and created an entire backstory for the area. Surprisingly, a handful of people in the community then used that for handmade lore also. It was incredibly fun and we had some amazing times, but the point is that the players will always fill in the gaps to whatever Blizzard leaves out, and when you're in the roleplay community, that's when headcanon really shines. We're all storytellers in one way or another. So as we take a look into the Tirisfal Uplands, I always like to approach new zones with the concept of what if in my head. Maybe the Turtle WoW devs approached this area and said, what if this was the scenario that happened, but to do it in a way which interrogates the existing WoW lore. I'm kinda struggling to get my meaning across here, but I kinda like to see it as, what if we took this concept that existed in WoW and wanted to explore it some more, or take a look at it deeper? Or if there was lore that existed in the past, which wasn't represented well in WoW. How could they explore that story? To make it clear, there are some elements in the Tirisfal Uplands that I like a lot, and there's some which I don't. But as I was playing through this zone, there was a few ideas which made me go, oh yeah, that idea wasn't that explored well in WoW, or yeah, I never actually considered this. I will also be playing this zone with a Horde character. There are a handful of Alliance quests in the region, so I'll briefly mention them when I need to. But that's enough yapping from me. So let's explore the references and hidden details behind the Tirisfal Uplands. Anyone who's leveled an undead character in World of Warcraft should be familiar with the Tirisfal Glades. In Classic, it provides the player with quests that will get them from around level 1 to level 10, where they'll be asked to continue questing into Silverpine Forest to the south. At this stage of the WoW timeline, the Forsaken are a very small faction in comparison to the rest of the Horde. They consist mainly as a resistance group under the command of Sylvanas Windrunner, and most of the undead in this faction have an aspect of free will. It wouldn't be until Cataclysm where the forces of the Forsaken fully mobilized. In Vanilla WoW, the main areas the Forsaken occupy is the Undercity, Deathnell, and Brill, with small outposts dotted across the remnants of Lordaeron. They're a faction that's fighting to survive. In Tirisfal Glades alone, you encounter 3 hostile factions: the Scourge, the Lordaeron Nobles, and the Scarlet Crusade, a group of human zealots, many of which have been the survivors of the fall of Lordaeron, with the sole goal of eradicating the undead. I'd love to talk more about the Scarlet Crusade, but that's a faction for another day. One of the areas which was hidden from the zone was the mountains to the west. In WoW Cataclysm, this held a secret area called the Whispering Forest. Previously in Vanilla WoW, this area was just undeveloped. Later, in the Legion expansion, this area would be opened up as part of the artifact weapon questline for paladins, where they would have to dive into a lake called Tirisfal, the progenitor to the name Tirisfal. However, in Cataclysm, this area just contained trees, critters, and a mysterious fairy ring. Near the centre of the forest, there is a mysterious ring of mushrooms, glowing with some sort of strange energy. A cloud of mist hovers over the area, glowing and otherwise remarkable for hours on end, but every now and again, the fairy dragons begin to appear. One by one, they fly erratically in the general area of the mushroom ring. Over time, 7 of them will fade in, and at some point, all 7 dragons seem to come to some foregone conclusion, and they begin to converge on the ring. The fairy dragons begin to sing. As they sing, beams of light shine from each dragon, converging on the centre of the mushroom ring, and other animals of the glen come to watch, curious about the lights and sounds, and just as the mysterious ritual starts, it stops. There was no explanation why this was in the game, but it was speculated that the ritual was to protect the glades from a deeper evil hidden away within the hollow earth beneath them. In Total WoW, this area has been fully developed into a mountainous region called the Tirisfal Uplands. It is majorly a horde zone, offering a new level of experience for the undead players from around level 15 to level 20. Previously, undead players would be sent to the Barrens in Kalimdor. To start questing in this zone, players can pick up the introductory quests from either the Sepulchre or the Undercity. There's 2 entrances to the zone, either through Silverpine or through the Tirisfal Glades via the Solidon Farmstead. Now here's a route with some jest here, as you'll most likely encounter rogue enforcers and remnant scouts jumping out at you from the tree line. For this video, we'll be taking the Silverpine entrance. It becomes clear very quickly that this area of Tirisfal is incredibly deadly, as you'll be facing enemies such as the Worgen, Scourge, Gnolls, rogue wizards, and remnants of the Lordaeron army. Here, Forsaken forces are stretched thin, with the area running rampant with hostiles everywhere. We're here to help the undead secure a stronger foothold in these lands. The 2 undead settlements in this area is Glenshire and Steepcliff Port. the road between the two patrolled by scouts, militia and gnolls. It makes getting around this area quite difficult to traverse. The area you'll be spending most of your time here is in Glenshire, a small town in the mountains. It has a small church run by the Bishop Brightcoff, but the religion of the Holy Light here was not as strong as in other areas of Tirisfal, as here they were mainly looking out for their own survival. As the farms in the uplands are either controlled by the Scourge or by the Lordaeron militia, the main economy of this town is through the nearby Greystone mine. Once we dispose of all the Worgen in there, we're one step closer to bringing this area back under control. One thing I've noticed about the Tirisfal Uplands is that it is very remote compared to the operations taking place under Sylvanas Windrunner. Aramatharis is currently occupied with the conflict in Silverpine, and a large part of the Forsaken forces are occupied with the Bulwark to the east. Here the undead feel more independent, with minimal interference from the Banshee Queen. Although there is a small force stationed in the uplands, they were mostly re-killed, in an ambush by the Cult of the Damned, ultimately leaving the Forsaken in the area outnumbered by the Lordaeron humans 5-1. While still loyal to Sylvanas, many of the undead here have their own agendas. I mean, in most Forsaken settlements, they're even governed by either a executor or by a magistrate, but no, here we're under the service of Duke Nargalas. The Tirisfal Uplands is an area that digs up old conflicts that were meant to be buried, reigniting old fires between factions that have bad blood with each other. It explores in its own way some unanswered questions from Warcraft 3 and some more obscure WoW lore, which makes it an incredibly fun zone to venture in. Rogue Wizards. Wizards who are rogues. This group of bandits can be found in the east of Tirisfal Uplands, hidden away in a mountain pass called the Rogue Heights. These rogues aren't to be confused with the rogue wizards aligned with the Defias Brotherhood, nor the rogue wizards you can find in Elwyn Forest. These wizards that you can find in Elwyn Forest are a type of hedge wizard, a negative term used to describe a wizard that has never received their formal training from Dalaran, and are therefore looked down upon by the Kirin Tor, the Wizard Council of Dalaran. Instead, these wizards are renegade wizards. These mages choose to delve into the secrets of magic by themselves, considered to be non-sanctioned renegades by the Kirin Tor. These rogue mages strive to expand their knowledge of magic and spellcraft beyond the constraints of what most other wizards believe to be safe or morally acceptable. Whilst the rogue wizards we find in the Uplands were most likely trained in Dalaran after the sacking of the city by the Scourge, it is most likely these wizards went on their own path, either for riches or glory. This band of mages is probably a reference to the human renegade creeps found in Warcraft 3. These little guys can be found in several maps including Dalaran and the Dalaran Ruins. It makes sense to find this group of wizards here, as they most likely went into hiding after the events of Warcraft 3. This group is led by Magister Salorn in a series of quests given to us by the former rogue wizard Harry Upton in Glenshire. We're tasked with beating the living snot out of them and stealing their arcane goods. This group appears to have joined forces with another bandit group whose leader is known as Bandit Lord Storn. In Steepcliff Port, we're asked by bounty hunter Nox to come back with his head. Whilst I don't think there is specific reference to anything, fighting bandit enforcers is just a nice variation to the quests. Let me pose a question to you. Who governs the Forsaken? Now, some of you might say Sylvanas Windrunner, but whilst being the leader of the Forsaken, no singular person can govern. Stormwind has the House of Nobles, Quel'Thalas had the Convocation of Silvermoon, and the Tauren have the Chieftains. But who governs the Forsaken? Each ruler in WoW has some kind of inner council, and their power is distributed between regional representatives. Arguably, the Forsaken still use magistrates as rulers of certain towns and executors as military commanders. For example, Magistrate 7 is the leader of the township of Brule, but arguably Tirisfal Glades is what you would be calling the Crown Lands, specifically ruled over by the monarch. Settlements under the direct control of the king, such as mentioned Brule, are appointed under a magistracy system where appointed individuals are given judicial and executive power. Another example of this is Magistrate Barthalas of Stratholm. To cut to the chase, something that isn't explored well and well is what happened to the landowners of Lordaeron. Many of them died, yes, but some of them also escaped or were resurrected. And once you die, some may argue that you lose all rights to that land and goes to the next of kin. Some members of the undead disagree, as they're not dead, they are undead, meaning alive, I guess. All in all is to say that the Forsaken still operate under some form of a feudalistic system where landowners swear loyalty to Sylvanas. Look, I'm not going to explain what feudalism is to you because we'll be here all day. Go play Kingdom Come Deliverance or something. But the idea of who owns what when it comes to family land has been explored before in retail WoW. The House of Barov is an example. In the questline, you either support the human Weldon Barov or the undead Alexei Barov, depending on your faction. In later WoW expansions, these characters become nothing more than a Team Fortress 2 joke. But in vanilla WoW, you're tasked with assassinating either one of the brothers in order for them to become the sole inheritor to Scholomance, also known as Caird Arrow. This is an interesting concept, and the idea of the Lordaeron nobility has been featured in characters such as Baron Rivendare and Tyrion Fordring. Other landowning nobles include characters such as Garithos, and in non-canon lore there are characters such as Duke Falriviere of House Falriviere and Lord Blackwood from House Blackwood. Welcome back, Mark Strong. There seems to be a contradiction here, since Baron Blackwood and the Garithos family seem to claim ownership of the Blackwood region of Lordaeron, but as the trading card game isn't canon, it's not that much of a big deal. Now, Duke Falriviere is interesting. Not the name, but the title, Duke.
For the Duke!
In feudalism, being a duke makes you a member of the royal family, meaning that someone here down the line has to have a relation to House Menethil. Keep that in mind for later. Anyways, this is a concept explored in the Tirisfal Uplands. Do former Lordaeron nobles wish to reclaim power while still remaining loyal to the Banshee Queen? The answer is yes, because hey, we're all equal in death, but some dead people are more equal than others. This is where we get into the topic of two key characters that play an important role in the story of the Uplands, Duke Nargilus and Duchess Grelda. There are two questlines involving these characters, both relating to securing the area from the remnants of Lordaeron's army and Grelda's alive human sister, Duchess Valiona. It is established early on that they belong to the House of Dalthos, and believe they are the rightful inheritors to the Tirisfal Uplands, which was once owned by Grelda's father. For Duke Nargilus, we gain his trust through a series of quests, with us being a one-man army against the humans. For Duchess Grelda, we do what the Forsaken always do, and commit war crimes by poisoning food supplies with the plague. The finale of these questlines involve us committing sororicide and unlocking a lockbox which contains the deeds to the Uplands. From talking to other characters throughout these quests, they're not held in high reputation, and they're certainly quite irritating to deal with, but nevertheless they're loyal to the family. Speaking of loyalty, it seems even in death, House Dalthos has their own guards which are loyal to them, which begs the question, how loyal are the free-willed Forsaken to Sylvanas? We've seen independent Forsaken before, such as Gunther Arcanis and Leonid Bartholomew. In later expansions though, it's portrayed that Sylvanas is an absolute supreme ruler over the Forsaken.
Burn it!
Which contrasts highly with the vanilla representation of the faction. I think the quests featuring the Duke and Duchess in the Uplands is quite amusing really. It displays how petty people can be when you've literally come back from the dead and the first thing you worry about is your wealth and power. Grelda even has ambitions of forming her own inner council once she reclaims her lands. It also explores the idea of what an undead noble might experience. Do they still hold the rights to the lands once they die and then are resurrected? Humans don't think so, but ultimately it shines a light on how the Forsaken feel displaced by the enemies around them. Now we get onto a section that I'm not particularly a big fan of. The Duchess Grelda is said to be a part of the royal family of House Darthos, which means somewhere along the line in her family tree she is a relative to House Menethil, the ruling house of the Kingdom of Lordaeron. This kinda gives her a weak claim to the throne and is therefore a potential threat to Sylvanas. Only a handful of people know that Calia Menethil is still alive, but Grelda is just standing there out in the open. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this. Maybe it's a little too fan servicey. However, I'm not too sure. It is said that she was supposed to receive the deeds to the Uplands on Coronation Day, which I think is referring to Arthas's Coronation Day, which was supposed to happen after Tyrannus's death, but that's not entirely clear. This raises the question of if this timeline is using the classic concept of feudalism and a royal family, how many other dukes and duchesses are out there which could possibly be a claimant to the throne of Lordaeron. There are already characters such as Duke Nicholas Zerenhoff in Retail WoW, and in Turtle WoW I think there is also Duke Tavinrad and Duke Oswald III as a part of the Scarlet Crusade. What's the status of them? We don't actually know. So this is a bit of fan content that opens up too many loose ends for my liking. On one final note here, I know the Desolate Council exists to rule the Forsaken in Sylvanas' absence when she was War Chief, but they weren't introduced until Legion, so that doesn't count. Whilst questing through the Tirisfal Uplands, you'll come across the remnants of the army of Lordaeron. This faction acts as one of the main antagonists of the zone, and they can be pretty spicy to fight. In your adventures you'll come across scouts, militiamen and knights and priests, each representing their Warcraft 3 unit counterparts. They have quite a tight hold on the northern area of the zone, occupying a ruined garrison as well as a farm in the area nearby. This faction represents the former standing army which was a part of the Kingdom of Lordaeron. In Retail WoW, there's not many people around anymore that can claim to be formerly a part of the army of Lordaeron. Many of the survivors either joined the Scarlet Crusade, the Argent Dawn, or fled south to the town of Southshore, one of the last Alliance settlements in Lordaeron. This was before the Forsaken committed a war crime again. There's also some remnants in Theramore also. I feel like this is one thing that Retail WoW does better than Turtle WoW, and that is making the Kingdom of Lordaeron feel like a distant memory and much more like the Wild West, where small factions are fighting for survival in a torn wasteland. In Turtle WoW, you can just rock up to a place and see the Lordaeron faction alive and well. Yes, I'm talking about Hawk's Vigil. Don't get me started on Hawk's Vigil. I hate to say it, but the representation of the remnants of Lordaeron can once again feel a little bit fanservicey. Much like with Kul'Thas, this is supposed to be a kingdom that was mostly wiped from the map. Regardless, it is interesting seeing this group of remnants up here, but where did they come from? One idea is that they're the remaining forces held over from the Alliance resistance, the force that operated in the aftermath of the Third War. Consisting of humans, elves and dwarves, the leader of this force was Grand Marshal Garithos, quite a notorious figure in the lore of Warcraft, and ultimately pushed the Blood Elves out of the Alliance.
Inhuman beast!
Out of an alliance of desperation, Garithos agreed to assault the former capital of Lordaeron with Sylvanas, in order to liberate it from the demon Balnazar, who had taken over the city after it had fell to the Scourge. After this, Garithos ordered Sylvanas and her undead, wretched animals to leave his city. Sylvanas, however, turned on Garithos and ordered Varimathras to kill him, which the Dreadlord gladly did. The resistance is never seen again after the battle. So, is this the remnants of the resistance? Possibly. There is no evidence for nor against it, but it's likely that these survivors of the resistance may have fled to the Uplands. This group would then rally around the surviving human family member, Duchess Valiona, to legitimize their claim to the Uplands. This faction seems quite isolated and hasn't made any attempts to join forces with the Scarlet Crusade, nor the rogue wizards in the nearby area. The leader of these remnants, Captain Silas, also may be a little bit loopy, but I'm unsure because there is some contradiction in the Alliance quest text for this character. Captain Silas gives Alliance players the Call to Aid questline, where he requests reinforcements from Stormwind. An outsider, you're the first in quite a long time. Welcome to the Remnants camp. To state our situation is bad would be an understatement of the highest regard. We are all that remains, bearing the crest of Lordaeron as a sigil, tucked away within a remote corner of the Uplands. As a leader of the Remnants and the commander of the army of Lordaeron, I would ask a favour of you. Prepare a letter to be sent to Stormwind, one of the final bastions of human power. Take it to General Marcus Jonathan. Lordaeron demands soldiers and supplies. Upon delivering the letter to Marcus Jonathan, he retorts, "Supplies? Soldiers? Where am I supposed to get these? Much less how am I supposed to send them so far north? Things must be desperate if a captain of the army of Lordaeron claims to be the leader of the Alliance." I have prepared my response, and sadly there is no way to meet his requests, as stretched thin as we are. Bring this back to him, and may the light bless those who remain there. Marcus basically responds with thoughts and prayers, and doesn't plan to do anything. An issue here is that Marcus says that Silas claims to be the leader of the Alliance when Silas never said that, unless he's referring to the Alliance Remnants faction led by Garithos. It seems to be an inconsistency here that could be clarified further. Instead, maybe the idea here is that Silas, in his isolation and surrounded on all sides, is going a little bit crazy and has images of self-grandeur. Or maybe this is the side effects of the grain we poisoned in an earlier quest. In the end, we slay both Duchess Valiona and Captain Silas and reduce the remaining human threat for good. This video is already full of questions, but here's another. In expansions such as Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm, Legion, and Battle for Azeroth, we see that the Forsaken have a formidable navy. We see their might during the invasion of Gilneas, as well as the assault on the Broken Shore, but where do these ships come from? In a round of Ask Creative Development, also known as CDev, a Q&A where Blizzard's creative development team met with Chris Metzen and nobody else. No one at all. This was done to provide official answers to fan questions concerning World of Warcraft. It took place in the story section of the official WoW forums. In one question, they were asked, "The Forsaken don't have a harbour or any dry docks. How do they create their ships?" The response they got was, "The Forsaken Navy is composed of the ships dredged up from the bottom of the ocean. Most of them were once among Lordaeron's fleets." Here the question is answered, but we don't get the full picture of what's going on with the Forsaken Navy. Yes, they have ships, but where do they keep their ships? Lordaeron has no ports and has nowhere to keep ships. So where are these ships docked when not being used? This has been a little bit of an in-joke for a while, since this question has never really been answered. In Total WoW, this is where Steepcliff Port enters the picture. Despite being a complete wreck when we visit it, Junior Architect Buford can be found and says, "A fine port for the Forsaken. We should be able to begin with the reconstruction soon. If only we had any workers." Which references the question of why the Forsaken have a lot of ships but no port. Since we don't really see Forsaken ships until later expansions, it makes sense why this port wouldn't be fully constructed yet. In this port, we can find a few new characters, but not many of note. There are a few related quests here as well, such as to clear out some gnolls. But that's all. Steepcliff Port provides a much needed innkeeper to the zone, as well as a flight point. As much as I would prefer the innkeeper to be in Glenshire, which is where you'll be doing most of your questing, it's a nice addition nonetheless. In the future of Mysteries of Azeroth, if the timeline ever moves forward, it'll be nice to see this port become a more active commerce hub. If you're familiar with the history of the Blood Elves, you know that several millennia ago, when the super mega continent of Kalimdor was broken up during the Sundering, arcane magic became outlawed by the Night Elves. This would eventually lead to a highborn known as Dathramar Sunstrider to lead a band of exiles to eventually found the Sunwell through a vial of energy which once formed the Well of Eternity. Whilst the Sunwell wasn't as powerful as the Well of Eternity, it helped provide the magical arcane energy the Highborn desired. As a result, the kingdom of Quel'Thalas was founded, and to throw off their Night Elven roots, the exiles led by Dathramar proclaimed themselves as the High Elves. However, on their journey to Quel'Thalas, when sailing from west to east, they first landed in Tirisfal Glades in Lordaeron, long before the human kingdom was founded. Here they tried to settle down, but something wasn't quite right. Found in the in-game book, The Founding of Quel'Thalas, we can read the following. Dathramar's fleet finally landed on the beaches of the kingdom men would later call Lordaeron. Forging inland, the High Elves founded a settlement within the tranquil Tirisfal Glades. After a few years, many of them began to go mad. It was theorized that something evil slept in that particular part of the world, but the rumors were never proven to be true. The High Elves packed up their encampment and moved northward towards another land rich with ley energies. Here there are two theories. One is that this place had a link to the Emerald Nightmare, which was an area of the Emerald Dream that had been corrupted by the old gods. For those who don't know, the Emerald Dream is a spirit world that exists outside the boundaries of the physical world. The Emerald Dream represents how Azeroth, the world, would have been if intellectual beings had not altered its surface, or what the world might be someday again. Powerful druids, such as Malfurion, have been known to enter the dream itself. In Retail WoW, we've been able to do this to fight the creatures spawned of the Emerald Nightmare. But essentially, it was speculated that the barrier here is so thin, which meant that the elves were being touched by the Emerald Nightmare, which made them go mad. The second theory, which by Legion was outright confirmed, was that the area was corrupted by the old gods. Technically, because the Emerald Nightmare was corrupted by the old gods, the entire answer to this question is basically old god shenanigans. but in the Legion expansion, the horror was revealed to be some dude named Zakaj the Corruptor, a servant of our favourite Lovecraftian-inspired old god, Yogg-Saron, which is okay, I guess. In another Ask CDev section with Chris Metzen, he responds differently. There is something incredibly unsettling there, but it's not an old god. It isn't recommended to go digging through the glades though. The answer here is far more cooler, rather than just saying, yeah, it's an old god. Don't get me wrong, the old gods are cool, but in a world as vast as this, it could have been its own thing. Technically, what we find isn't an old god, but a servant of the old gods, but whatever. In Total WoW, you can find the ruins of Ishnu'danil to the southwest of the Uplands. Hidden away, you can find elven ruins as well as a high elf and his bodyguards. As an Alliance player, you can pick up a series of quests from Scryer Lordaeron, where he talks about how this area was where their ancestors once settled. Here he sends you into the ruins to claim a tablet. Once translated, it says, "Avoid Shala Aran. Avoid the Ishnu'danil. There is only darkness here." Lordaeron says that Ishnu'danil translates to Fortune's Peak, whilst Shala Aran means the Shadow Well. Following this, he obviously sends us to go find his assistant in the well, and when we head down there, we find his long dead corpse. Side note, hidden away in the further north of the map, behind mountains, if you swim north and then east from Steepcliff Port, you can find a High Elven ship. I imagine this is where these High Elves originally landed. Who knows? What we do find in the well is mobs called the Black Blood of Shala Aran. Do you know where we've also seen Black Blood before? Yep, that's right, the Black Blood of Yogg-Saron, also known as Saronite, a metal found in Northrend which can be refined into armor and fortifications. Those exposed to it eventually suffer from insanity. It's a byproduct of the old god's physical manifestation. Saronite can also take liquid and vapor forms, meaning that the darkness under Tirisfal is potentially a tendril of Yogg-Saron. Despite being jailed in Aldwar in Northrend, I wouldn't be surprised if a tendril made its way down somewhere into northern Lordaeron, or it is simply a reference to the servant of Yogg-Saron we find down there in the Legion expansion. Yes, the idea of the Shadow Well being a mirror of the Sunwell has been lost on me. Perhaps this could have been an area they tried to create the Sunwell, but failed. So, that wraps it all up. I hope you enjoyed the speculations, references, and lore behind the Tirisfal Uplands. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments. Thank you to Capybara and Steve the Wizard for becoming my first 99p members. You can also join for 99p if you want to do so. I don't know. Support me. I don't know, man. Okay, whilst we're here, let's do some housekeeping. I'm incredibly proud of the response I got from the last video, and I'm really appreciative of the comments that you guys have left. However, to make it clear, I'm not affiliated with Total WoW in any way, so when I get comments complaining about something outside of my control, especially if it's complaining about something really dumb, it's not my problem, this isn't the place to post it, you know. It's like if a guy walked into a Wimpy's during summer and said, "I want the Christmas burger," and the cashier's like, "Sorry, we don't serve that," and then the guy begins to cry, complain, and go full Karen on the guy behind the counter, whilst everyone is just looking at the guy complaining. It's embarrassing. If you do have an issue with Total WoW, such as the direction of the lore, don't cry about it to me. I have no control over this. Do not even, and don't even harass a dev in the comments. This is my house. If you have a problem with the game, please use the appropriate communication channels. Keep it civil. Otherwise, you know where the door is. However, I am open to feedback on the production of this video, so please let me know if there's areas for improvement. Let me know what you think of the video. The next zone we'll be taking a look into in Total WoW is the Goblin starting zone. Take care.